My name is Dorothy Harris. I'm 72 years old. The spine is no longer the same, but the memory. Ah, ah, this one is still alive like burning fire. Tell me something. And when justice arrives late, but it does, is it still worth it? I spent 35 years of my life inside the same house. I cooked, cleaned, took care of the sick, rocked children, even prepared the wake of the boss' first wife with my own hands. I never asked for anything. No favor, no money, no recognition, just respect. And for a long time, I thought I had it. But the day he died, and his new wife walked into court parading around as the owner of everything, I realized that respect for many people, wow, is just a beautiful word. You may have come here wanting to understand how an old maid turned the tables at the last minute. Because I understand you. What you will see here is not shouting, nor cruel revenge. It's time, true, and a role that has almost been forgotten. By the end of this story, you'll understand why I left that courtroom without raising my voice, but with the world in my hands. Because the mistress thought she had taken everything, but she didn't know what I was carrying in my bag. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know something. I'm not a woman to raise my voice. I never was. I have always believed that silence, when well guarded, has more strength than any scream. And it was in silence that I opened my purse in that courtroom full of fine people. I got up slowly, down, with my bones tired, but with a firm soul, and handed the judge an envelope that no one there expected, a hand-signed paper, 3 months before the boss died, a document that could change everything. And it did. I remember Charlotte's face, slowly paling, as if watching the ground flee. But I'll tell you about that calmly. Now, if this story touched any corner of your heart, if you've ever felt the weight of being forgotten by those who helped the most, or if you've been taken away what was yours, as if it were nothing. So I ask you, stay here with me, leave your like, subscribe, not to please me, but to let other women like me know that they are not alone. This story is not just mine. It belongs to all of us who were invisible until the truth came out. I remember as if it were yesterday, the day I first set foot in the Whitmore mansion. It was a white house with imposing columns and windows that looked out at the world as if keeping secrets. Savannah has these things, old places, full of memory. At the time, I was 32 years old, recently widowed, with calloused hands from work, and her heart even more tired from loneliness. The newspaper I'd read, traditional family seeks trusted housekeeper for home in Forsyth Park. Discretion, firmness and good manners required. I went, without great hopes, but with a dignity that not even grief took away from me. Grace Whitmore answered me at the door, a tall lady with clear eyes and a calm voice. She didn't look at me as if I was just another employee. He asked me if I had already eaten, if I wanted water, if the grief was too heavy. 3 questions, and I knew that this place could be more than a job. And it was. The days turned into months, and the months, years. I took care of the house as if it were my own, and in a way, no way, it was not because of the name on the papers, but because of the marks I left. Every corner had a piece of me. This back, well, this was a count, arranged in the order that calmed the boss stomach ache. The linen towel cabinet, wow, which I folded with lavender to give it a smell of home. As Grace said, Ma, the grandchildren, those boys, they ran through the aisles, calling me Miss Dotty. When they fell, and idea what? It was my lap they were looking for. When they dreamed ugly, it was my honey tea that made them sleep again. William Howe, the boss, was a serious man. Tunstein. He looked at everything over his glasses and spoke little. But over time, we found our way. I knew how he liked his coffee. Strong, unsweetened, and served in the blue mug with the handle chipped. He said that the splinter reminded him that nothing was perfect, but that imperfection was what lasted the longest. Look at that. Perhaps he was right. In that house, I saw birthdays, baptisms, entire holidays repeated. I saw Grace slowly fall ill, and I stayed by her side until my last breath. She shook my hand at the hospital and said, "You're my soul, sister. Dotty, take care of them for me." And I took care of it, as if they were mine. I gave myself entirely, as only a woman who has lost everything is capable of doing. But do you know what marked me the most? It was the way I was invisible to those who came from outside. At parties, now, I passed among the guests with a tray in my hand, and no one knew my name, only the ones in the house. And even then, I didn't care, because inside, and honest decide, I was seen. Well, it was useful. She was dear. Now, tell me, how many women have felt this? To be invisible to many, and dice otaway, I am not telling you, but essential to a few, to be the one who organizes everything, holds everything, and yet is only called the helper. If you've been through this, comment below whether I've lived it. Sometimes a comment is enough for us to know that you are not alone. Grace set off on a rainy afternoon. I had shielded at our style, unchancicatizu, sebukai, molting externaria. After that, no, things started to change. Slowly, almost without noise. But it'll get there, because what seemed eternal, it was going to be fragile, like old porcelain. And it all started with a visit. A woman, a high heel, a rehearsed smile. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? Well, then listen to me. Because it was on that day that I felt the first wind of the storm that would come. Grace had been gone for a little over 2 years, when the front gate creaked with a different sound. I was watering the azaleas when I saw the car stop. It was black, modern, too glossy for Mr. William's style. I needed to confound upward and touch dosage of tea. The door opened, and a woman who looked like she had come out of a magazine came out of it. Stiletto heels, tight dress, hair so aligned that not even the Savannah wind had the courage to touch it. She reached out to her boss as if she was used to being led. And he offered his arm without hesitation. I'll hello. Yes, it's Getty. Charlotte, honey. This is how she introduced herself. Charlotte Monroe. It's a great pleasure to finally meet you, Miss Dottie. William talks a lot about you. He smiled widely. No. But his eyes, oh, her eyes didn't smile together. I know an empty smile from afar. And that, William was trained, rehearsed, fake as plastic flour. I remained silent. Why should they talk to one or down? I just replied with a welcome and went back to the kitchen. I've seen a lot of people enter that house, but something told me that woman, I wasn't going to leave any time soon. In a short time, the routine began to slip into the corners. The floral curtains that Grace had so lovingly chosen were replaced by cold blinds. The family cabinet disappeared, very old-fashioned. Charlotte said, "Ah." She renovated the library. Myself had the old books donated and filled the shelves with soulless decorative objects. The dining table, where we serve so many Christmases, has been replaced by a smaller one. More practical, she claimed. But practice for whom? Now, I wondered. That house smelled of history, and she wanted to turn everything into a magazine showcase. It didn't take long for the layoffs to come. First, it was the gardener, then the assistant cook, who had been there for more than 20 years. The excuse was always the same: cost-cutting, modernization, professionalization. I continued, because I've always been stubborn, and also because Grace had asked me to take care of the house. But no, little by little, my presence went from being respected, the tolerated one. Dorothy, the uniform of the new agency has arrived, and I'd like you to use it from today, okay? She said this by handing me a white outfit with a ruffled apron. You Shams, who always wore my simple cotton dresses, washed and ironed by myself, looked at that rag as someone who faces an offense disguised as kindness. But I wore it. I wore it because at that moment, I still thought I was serving Grace's memory, not Charlotte's whims. William, he looked like another man, quieter, more distracted. Sometimes I would find him standing on the porch, staring at nothing. When I asked if he wanted tea, he just nodded. He didn't talk like he used to. He did not ask about the boys, nor the garden, nor even the weather, and it was as if he had erased the past with a thin eraser, one line at a time. And Charlotte, with her schedule full of appointments and new friends from the big city, was filling the spaces. He took William to dinners, events, short trips to Charleston. When they came back, She laughed loudly on the stairs, and he just followed her with that lost look. His children began to move away. One of them, Thomas, remarked to me in the garage, "Miss Dotty, I don't recognize my father any more." I didn't know what to say, because I don't either. Inside, Charlotte was in charge of everything, but he never screamed. It was worse. He sent with a smile, with a note left on the bench, with a dry phone call. One day, he called me into the office and said, "You can reduce your presence to just 3 days a week." Right? It is more efficient. Well, we are modernizing services. We are, she said, as if she were the one who had planted those roots, as if she had the right to prune what she didn't understand. I nodded. No. I left without saying a word. I returned home on foot, even though I had the car available. I needed to feel the ground. Now, hear the noise of the leaves, knowing that I still had something firm under my feet. The following week, I found the frame of a picture I loved. A picture of me, Grace, and the grandchildren waiting down in the garden, inside the storage room, with the image torn up. Oh, it must have been ruined in a last cleaning. Charlotte said dismissively. I didn't answer. I just held the shards of the frame with a cloth and kept it inside my bag. There were things that couldn't be glued, but they also didn't deserve to go to waste. And it was at that time that I began to understand that, in the eyes of that woman, I was not part of the house. I was an old piece, which they still didn't have the courage to throw away. But I felt it. I felt the thread being cut, a 35-year bond undone, knot by knot, gesture by gesture. And I, who never asked for anything, started to keep everything. Words, changes, looks. My silence became a witness. In that house, I was no longer welcome, only supported. And even so, I stayed, because there are places that we don't leave until they leave us first. But what Charlotte didn't know is that I also knew how to play quietly. Have you ever felt that? That someone came into your story wanting to erase every chapter that came before it? Well, that's exactly how I lived. And at that time, I still didn't know that the worst was to come, because she hadn't yet shown everything she was capable of. And when he showed, I was there, now, not here, watching, selling everything, putting everything away. But what happens when those who keep so much decide to show what they have? It wasn't long before my name disappeared, even from the timesheets. Temporary helper, night discernium, Histinitis. That's how the new agency classified me. I know, who knew every creak of that floor, became just another name in an Excel spreadsheet. Charlotte hired a company to take care of the house, more professional services, she said. And even without being called, I kept going, twice a week, with the uniform she chose, the bag with my apron embroidered and my dignity folded in my pocket. I showed up before 7 and left everything in order. I cleaned the silver without anyone asking, and she took care of him because William, he was starting to get lost. In the beginning, it was a name changed here, a forgotten key there, but over time, his eyes began to wander as if searching for memories that were slowly fading. Charlotte said it was just age. That old man really confuses. But I saw what it was. It was Alzheimer's coming slowly, like an icy wind coming through the cracks. But no one wanted to see it. So I was the one who saw it, and I was the one who took care of it. I started to bring the right medicines. I put it in his cup without fanfare. I made an appointment with a doctor from my church, asked him to go discreetly. I took William there, saying it was just a checkup. The doctor confirmed what I already knew. But Charlotte, Charlotte didn't want to know about the report. Is fine. Nissi, Hontokane, Bunteran, Adernan Hawa. Dorothy, you just need to rest. We don't need to dramatize. It was always this word, dramatize, as if the disease were an exaggeration of mine, as if a man's decadence was a nuisance that she needed to hide under the rug. It gradually disappeared. One day, she called me Grace. Another asked where the boys were, who were already adults and lived far away. But there was one night, a night ill never forget. It was raining outside, and I stayed late. The caretaker at the agency had left earlier, saying that the road to her house flooded easily. I stayed. No. I made some tea, adjusted the pillows, and sat there by his bed. All Grinchaunet was his bed, as I did with the boys when they had a fever. William was awake, his eyes moist, his breathing ragged. He looked at me as if he was seeing through the fog. Dorothy? He muttered. Oh, my Dorothy? I responded with a nod, trying to hold back the tears that insisted on coming. Read it to me, he asked. That one from Grace, the one she liked. I knew he was talking about the book of poems by Emily Dickinson that I read to Grace in her last weeks. I went to the bookcase, which luckily Charlotte hadn't emptied yet, and picked up the old copy, with the faded cover and the marks of my favorite pages. I sat next to him and started reading. The voice came out shaky at first, but I stood firm. Verse by verse, I saw his eyes quiet down. It was as if the confusion stopped for a moment just to let him remember. And he remembered. When I finished, he held my hand, weak, cold, but still his. You stayed, right? He whispered. It always was. Well, at that moment, something in me lit up, a small but warm spark. Even though he forgot the world, he remembered me, not for the positions, nor for the roles, but for the presence, for care, for constancy. Charlotte could have changed the furniture, changed the rules, ripped my photos off the shelf. But she couldn't take that away from me. His memory. Wow. The memory of what we have lived, of what we have built in silence. That night, I returned home with my clothes wet from the rain and my heart heavy with sadness, but with a thread of dignity tied in my soul, because, for the first time in a long time, I knew that all had not been lost. Not everything had been in vain. But time, time is patient. He waits, he prepares, and little did I know that that moment would be just the beginning. Because what would William say to me in the following days? It would change everything, and it would give me the key to what Charlotte never imagined I would have the courage to use. Want to know what it was? So listen to what comes next, because that's when the truth started to come out of hiding. One day, tidying up the library of the house, the one that Charlotte said was expendable, I decided to open the piano. It had been years since anyone touched him. It was Grace's, who played on rainy Sundays. The smell of closed wood hit my face like old nostalgia. I lifted the lid, and inside, among the forgotten sheet music, there was a hardcover notebook covered in navy blue fabric. William's name was handwritten, with his handwriting a little shaky. I opened slowly. The first page just said, "Things I can't forget." I became another. They were loose thoughts, without order. Some dated, others not. They were snippets of recollections with Grace, bitter phrases about Charlotte. She never understood the silence of the house, he once wrote, and short confessions scattered between the lines. But there, on zeer not dort suga, the servant, station at the end, on a yellowed sheet, was something that made me stop breathing for a moment. The beginning of a New Testament, written with his hand. One of them called that since touch it, don't say, without formality, but with clarity. He said what he wanted to leave for whom, and my name was there for the first time, written with respect, not as a maid, not as a helper, but as Dorothy Harris, my confidante, my guardian, Nadansiko Sakal. I closed the notebook with trembling hands. I kept it in my bag without thinking twice, and I returned home with a full head and a racing heart, as it had not been in a long time. For days, I didn't say anything, but something told me that he knew what he was doing. That notebook was for me, and I would have my answer soon. It was on a cloudy morning. Days later, William woke up, agitated. No. Charlotte was in Charleston, town, at some convention, and the house was quiet. He called me in a weak voice, but with a firm look. "Dorothy, Condon, I need you to help me write some things." I took paper and pen, sat next to him. "No, forgive me if I skip parts. My head is no longer the same." He said, "but I need to record while I still remember." He began to dictate, piecemeal, stumbling over words, going back, taking a deep breath. I was writing everything, name by name. Oxyzi, Wenstar to Psalm, will for will, and sustain. He wanted to correct what he had left crooked. He told me that he had trusted Charlotte too much, and that he regretted it. He spoke of his children, his grandchildren, one, the foundation he and Grace created. And he talked about me. You stayed, Dorothy. Then, 1, 2, while everyone left. You took care of me like no one else did. He asked me to take that document to his trusted lawyer, Marcus LaRue, a man I knew by sight from the time Grace was still alive. William said that he had talked to him before, but that now he needed to finalize. I signed as a witness. So did he. Then, with a threat of voice, he handed me an envelope and said, I yelled, "A sign? Keep that. Only deliver if you need it." And then he smiled. A tired but true smile. That night, he slept more peacefully than I had seen in months, and he never woke up again. The silence in that house after his departure was different from all the other silences. It was not that of peace. It was that of absence. Charlotte returned the next day. Why? Crying beautifully in front of the staff, but her eyes were dry as wood. Has gone. And Dottie, there was nothing left, but there was left. Yes, a lot. And I had it all in store. In my bag, on my chest, in my memory. I'm here, opening my heart, telling my story. If you're listening, I don't know. Leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel because I still have a lot of things saved to tell you. Because what lies ahead, it's not easy, but it is necessary. Meondo. Charlotte thought she was in control. Nothing else could escape her hands. But was she prepared for what I was going to take out of my purse on the day of the court? That's when the story starts to turn. And you'll see, the funeral went exactly as Charlotte wanted. An impeccable production, as if she were selling another one of her luxurious homes. Columns of white lilies flanked the entrance to the chapel. Tall arrangements, too symmetrical, without emotion. He hired a choir from the local university to sing Amazing Grace. But there was no fun in that scene. The guests came in rental cars, dressed in matching shades, and many didn't even know who William was. They were Charlotte's classmates. New people, important in name, empty in gesture. When Dr. His old friends, the real ones. Few knew about the ceremony. The children, they came, but arrived late, sat in the back and left without talking to anyone. His house had not been theirs for a long time. And I stood there, alone, leaning against the back row, wearing the same gray linen coat I wore to Grace's funeral. It wasn't out of attachment. It was for remembrance. That coat still carried the smell of dignity. Charlotte behaved like the main star of a show she wrote herself. She stepped into the pulpit in a black dress too tight for mourning and read a rehearsed speech, each word sounding like a window. William was the love of my life, a man of vision who entrusted me with his world. And I promise here, before all of you, that I will continue his legacy. Legacy. Wow. She used this word as someone who keeps something noble in her pocket. But what legacy did she know? I didn't know about his taste for poetry, the way he folded dish towels, the cracked cup he refused to throw away. She didn't know the little things, and they're the ones that build a real legacy. After the speech, as everyone headed to the coffin, I made my way slowly. I didn't want to draw attention. I didn't need that. I put my hand on the dark wood, said a short prayer, and silently thanked him. What it was down, I searched through, for all that was good, and for all that he taught me. It was at this moment that Charlotte came up from behind, and, in an icy whisper, said, "You can go now, Dorothy. Your part is over." I looked at her, not with anger, nor with pity, only with the certainty of those who already know the end before the last page. Smile, Lady Eldar, it calm. A short smile, no, almost invisible, but full of things she would never understand. I left the chapel in silence. The sky was closed. The wind cut through the trees of Forsyth Park, as if he also knew that there was something out of place there. I got home, took off my shoes, and sat for a while in front of the extinguished fireplace. The envelope was there, inside my bag. As always, I took it, smoothed the surface with my fingertips. William had trusted me, even in the last few days, even with my mind failing. He knew who I was. That's it. That was more than Charlotte would ever have. But the quiet time was ending, because the day of the reading of the Testament was approaching. And what I took in that bag, it would make a lot of people swallow their own name. But were they ready to listen to the voice of those who had been silenced for so many years? Because when the judge opened that envelope, no one imagined what was written. Not even me. The day of the reading of the will has arrived like the storm in the Savannah summer. Stuffy, heavy, and with a smell in the air that seems to warn that something is going to change. The lawyer's office was in an old building on Broughton Street, all renovated inside, full of dark wood books that no one read. Charlotte made sure to arrive early. Of course, she sat right in the center of the room, her legs crossed, and that navy blue dress she wore to important meetings. In her mind, now, so cute, so structured and cute. It was just another contract being signed in her favor. She even took her personal hairdresser to fix the strands before entering, as if it were a parade. I sat in the back, as I always did, in the ranks of those who wait, those who serve, those who remain silent. But that day, something inside me knew that my place had changed. The lawyer started with formalities, full name of the deceased, dates, legal terms. I didn't understand half of those beautiful words, but I understood enough. Forsyth Park's house was going to Charlotte. The 2 cars too, bank accounts, investments, works of art, everything for her. There was not even a mention of the name, Dorothy. Wow. Neither as a souvenir, nor as a thank you. It was as if I had never existed. I looked down at the floor, my hands resting on my aged leather bag. And at that moment, I felt a chill rise up my back. not of sadness, but of firmness, because that silence, it wasn't going to last long. Charlotte find emotion more. She wiped her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief that she took out of her bag just for this moment. The lawyer closed his briefcase, cleared his throat, and said, "Why?" in a well-measured voice. "Why? Hi. Does anyone want to say something before we close?" The room fell silent, and the old farm turned to get up the count. No one moved. That's when I got up, slowly, like someone who is learning to stand after a long time on her knees. Everyone turned their faces away. Some didn't even know my name. But when they saw me, I realized they didn't need to know. It wasn't about me. It was about everything that was taken away from me in silence. I opened my bag carefully. That envelope was already softened at the edges from so much that I caressed it without realizing it. It was brown, simple, down. What should he set up on? Sealed with red wax and the stamp of William's old office. I walked over to the lawyer's desk and handed it over. He said nothing. My eyes said it all. He looked at the envelope as if he saw a ghost enter the room. He examined the seal, turned the paper in his hands, saw the signature. "This is Mr. Kynan. Why do Whitmore's handwriting? What I say?" He spoke softly, low, almost as if he was afraid to hear his own voice. Charlotte uncrossed her legs. The smile came out of her face like a blown candle. "What's that?" she asked. But the lawyer did not respond. He opened the envelope carefully and removed the folded sheets. He read in silence, his brow furrowed, his eyes running along lines. No one breathed. One of his partners, sitting next to him, looked over his shoulder and pursed her lips. And it was at that moment that I knew I was not alone. The truth was there, Mom, and it would speak louder than any title of Lady of the House. If you've come this far, listening to me, let me tell you something from the heart. Sometimes life forces us to wait so long that we forget we still have a voice. But when she comes back, my dear, the world listens. So, if this story is touching you in any way, if you've ever felt erased by someone, comment there. I exist because every time we write this, even if it's just once, we reaffirm what the world has tried to forget. The lawyer looked up and said, "This document needs to be analyzed immediately." Charlotte stepped forward. My eyes, annoyed, wide. "That's absurd. William would never talk to anyone without my knowledge." But no one looked at her anymore. Everyone was looking at me, the woman who had been in the deep for decades, and now stood before them with the only thing that still mattered. The truth. The session was suspended right there. The new will would be verified. No. The authenticity confirmed. And while everyone left the room in silence, I sat back on my bench, slowly, with a light soul. But the most difficult thing was still missing. The content of the will, and what was written there. It would change everything. Because William, after all, still remembered who had really been with him when it all fell apart, and when the reading of this new document began. No one, no, not even Charlotte, was prepared. None. Do you think she gave up easily? Well, wait and see what she did next. 2 days later, we were summoned again. We were summoned again. Only this time, it was no longer a meeting with coffee and a forced smile. It was an official session with a judge present. All recorded by Chatham County. The New Testament had been verified, authenticated. The lyrics were by William. The stamp, too. Everything was in order, as he would have demanded. Wow. The room was less crowded. No, some of Charlotte's friends didn't even show up. Perhaps they sensed the smell of change in the air. I went with the same gray coat, Grace's mother-of-pearl brooch on my chest, and the courage that only old age gives us, the one that doesn't scream, just stares at it. The judge began the reading. His voice was dry, formal, and but each word fell like a stone on the floor of the room. I, William Edward Whitmore, nay, outdoor, in full conscience and will, declare this document as the final expression of my wishes. I closed my eyes for a second. I took a deep breath, and I listened. The first surprise. Half of the house in Forsyth Park would go to the foundation for the elderly that William and I helped to create. Back in the 90s, Dolly's Haven, he had suggested the name at the time, saying that no one cared for old people with their soul like I did. That foundation was forgotten, without funds, almost closing. But now she would have a new chance. Then, the judge continued. A significant portion of the financial assets would go to scholarships in Grace Whitmore's name, intended for young black women in southern Georgia. My heart almost stopped. It was her face. It was as if she had come back just to see it happen. And then, the unexpected, to Mrs. Town, one by Dorothy Harris, for her dedication, loyalty, and and humanity. I leave the property on Tybee Island. 2 vehicles, and a lifetime pension adjusted annually according to the cost of living in the county. Those words. I had to hear it twice to believe it. Tybee Island, I'm on that. What is your Soda? The house where we spent so many summers, where Grace taught me how to plant lavender in the backyard, and where William laughed like never before in Savannah. It was the only place where he put his watch aside. And now, it was mine. Charlotte was static when the judge told her that she would receive only her personal works of art, the paintings in the room, a Japanese vase, and a few rare books. She almost stood up. This is absurd. This document was manipulated. He was sick. This woman, her voice rose, but the judge cut her off with a gesture. The document was analyzed and validated by independent experts. Mr. Whitmore personally registered this will in this courtroom. 3 months before his death. Silence. A heavy silence, so dense that we could feel the air bend. Charlotte sank into the chair as if she had been hit without a hand. I continued to sit without raising my head, just holding the bag in my lap tightly. No, at that moment, I felt no pleasure, nor revenge. What I felt was a peace that I hadn't known for a long time. A kind of justice that doesn't need a loud voice, only truth. Because the truth, she doesn't need to explain herself. It just needs to be said. It's curious how sometimes we spend our whole lives serving a house, a family, a name, and yet we don't feel like we own anything. But it only took one page, written with love and awareness, to remind me that I was also part of this story. If you've ever felt this, if you've ever lived waiting for recognition that never came, comment here with a line insist. I am how it is, because there are things that only the silence of the soul understands. I left that courtroom without haste. Each step was as if I was coming back to myself. But the story does not end there. Because Charlotte, she didn't take it easy. And what did she do next? It still gives me chills. Do you think she dropped the bone like that? So fast? Well, wait and see how far someone can go when power slips through their fingers. Charlotte did not accept. Of course not. As soon as the judge's decision came out, she filed an appeal, saying that the new will was invalid, that William was not fully conscious when he wrote it, that I, lo and behold, would have influenced it, as if a woman like me, black, old, and quiet, could bend the will of a man like William Whitmore. It was desperate to see how she still believed that the world turned the way she told it to. But the world had already begun to turn differently. What? And Charlotte, poor thing, didn't notice. Mom. It was then that the papers began to turn for good. Attorney Marcus LaRue, the same one William trusted, decided to investigate further. He discovered that Charlotte had personally signed medical documents on behalf of her husband. She hid the reports that confirmed the advance of Alzheimer's and prevented any long-term treatment, all to keep control over him. As just tired, she said, now. But the truth, she wanted him to die, lucid enough to leave her with everything, and confused enough not to change the will. The local press, which lives on elegant scandal, soon published a discreet story. William Whitmore's second wife may have concealed medical condition for her own benefit. The whole of Savannah read it, and Savannah, he does not forget easily. The luxury real estate company where Charlotte worked released a brief but cutting note. We have terminated our professional relationship with MS Whitmore for ethical and reputational reasons. I saw the sign with her name being removed from the facade with my own eyes on a rainy, late afternoon. And as much as I don't wish harm to anyone, I confess that sound of the drill loosening the screws sounded like justice in my ear. It was that same week that I received a letter. It came from California, addressed in simple handwriting. Miss Dorothy Harris. Inside, Meow. Hence, a single leaf. Signed by Thomas and Melissa, William's children from his first marriage. The letter read, Miss Dotty, we know everything you have done. Nugstaya, and Solshnanu Datakir. Everything he endured in silence. Our father died peacefully because you were by his side. We will never forget. Thank you for being the only adult in the house when the world came crashing down. I read that letter about 10 times, and I cried every time. Charlotte was last seen 2 weeks later, packing suitcases in the trunk of a rented black sedan. They say he left for Atlanta. No one missed it. No. No one asked how. The house in Forsyth Park began to function as the Foundation's headquarters. And I went to Tybee Island the first morning I spent there. Very early. I went to the sand. I took off my sandals slowly, one, as if taking their own story off their feet. I felt the cold sand, the wind on my face, the noise of the sea, with no one telling me to, without a clock rushing, without obligation hanging on my body. For the first time in my entire life, I walked lightly. I didn't carry a tray, or a shopping list, or back pain because of stairs. It was just me and God. You know how sometimes we spend so much time being support that we forget that we are also structure. I realized there, with my foot sinking into the sand, I exist beyond service, beyond function, beyond pound stayed here, and beyond a function. I exist, that's it. No one can take it away. But make no mistake, the story does not end here, because the past, as buried as it may seem, has the habit of knocking on the door when we least expect it, and what I found in the old beach house, hidden at the bottom of a drawer, made me return to the city. And when I came back, I went back to solve what was missing. Do you know what it was? I'll tell you in the next part, because this one, no, my dear, no one saw it coming. It took me a while to go. The beach house on Tybee Island always had a kind of distant air to me, as if it were a place reserved for a kind of life that wasn't mine. William went there with Charlotte. Me. At least that's what she made a point of spreading. They said that she redecorated the entire interior, that she made renovations, that she called it our piece of heaven, and I believed for a long time that there was no room for me there, that it was a place where my memory did not go beyond the door. But after everything that happened, after justice was done with silence and signed paper, I understood that that house also belonged to me in another way. And deep down, it always belonged. I arrived in the late afternoon, with the burgundy sky and the sea lazily licking the sand. The key still had the old label, now, TH42, Main. The handle turned with difficulty, as if the house was also waiting for me. Entered, loud. I took a deep breath. The first thing I smelled was the smell. Dried lavender. Wood. and a slight touch of cinnamon. The plank floor creaked. The walls were a faded blue, and the curtains were raw linen, letting the light in a beautiful, almost reverent way. It didn't look like a Charlotte set. Seemed I did. My. I walked through the rooms as if walking inside their own memory. In the living room, well, on a white sideboard, no, there was a picture frame that made me stop. Well, it was a picture of me, Ahern, William, and Grace in the garden of Forsyth Park. Smiling, I held a bouquet of hydrangeas, Grace in the wide-brimmed hat, and William in a light jacket. That photo, I didn't even remember that it existed, but there it was, carefully framed. Ooh. Next to it, a glass cake holder with a lid. Just like the one I used in Savannah. Inside, it was empty, but underneath, taped together, was a handwritten recipe. Dorothy's corn cake, don't steer in the oven for 30 min. The lyrics were mine. The paper, old, stained with grease, and framed like a relic. I went to the kitchen, and there, on the wall next to the refrigerator, 2 more framed recipes, one of peach pie and the other of shortbread. All signed, Wolio, Dottie, and I opened the closet and came face to face with a quilt, handmade, sewn with pieces of floral fabrics. When I pulled it out, I saw embroidery in the lower corner. To Dottie, always, G. It was Grace. That couldn't have been Charlotte's idea. That was from before, much earlier. And it was as if every corner of that house said, quietly, wow, you've been here all along, even without knowing it. I sat on the couch and cried. I cried in silence, as I have cried so many times in my life. But this time, it was not pain. It was relief. It was a reunion. William, even in the days when he could no longer say everything clearly, had left me signs, concrete memories, fragments of love, guarded with care, and Grace. Even she left her last seam there, as if she knew that one day I would need to feel at home. Kaibi's house was not his mistress. It never was. It was the woman who served, who loved, who stayed. How? It was mine. If this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, will it help me to carry it forward? Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. Sometimes we'd just need to hear that we were remembered. In the following days, I cleaned everything calmly. I removed the ornaments that had no soul. I kept the ones that had history. I planted lavender on the back porch. I put the poetry books back on the shelf. I started cooking just for myself, something I had never done in my life. And at night, he would sit in the rocking chair and look at the sea as if he finally has time to listen to his own soul. I no longer needed anyone's permission to exist, but the past. He always finds a way to come back. And one day, rummaging through the drawers of the dresser in the master bedroom, I found a letter that wasn't for me, but it concerned me. A letter addressed to Charlotte, written by William's trembling hand. Oh, with a sentence that made me freeze. If you're reading this, it's because Dorothy already knows everything. What else did he know? And why did this letter never reach her hands? What she hid? Or what did she know I should never find out? I needed to understand. Because the truth, it wasn't over yet. William's letter left my heart racing. But it was what I found days later that really took me off my feet. I was rummaging through a wooden cabinet in the hallway, behind old papers, when I saw a box of wine piled up in the background. It was heavy. When I opened it, I didn't find bottles, but an old blanket, some moldy papers, and under everything, a notebook with a black cover, one of those simple ones, with no name on the outside, with palm. The corner of the cover was bitten onto Mary's one, as if it had been hastily put away or hidden long ago. I sat right there on the cold wooden floor. I shivered with my back against the wall and opened it. The front pages were doodles. Large in a world that has sealed on the outfall. Loose ideas, dinner guest lists, menus. Everything was very organized, with a controlled, firm handwriting. But soon the notes began to change tone. They were like secret thoughts, written with a sincerity that only those who do not believe that someone will read allow themselves to write. Enter his life with patience. Be helpful. Wait for the time of the first wife to end. The house is beautiful. The foundation will be my platform. I read that and felt my stomach churn. It wasn't just interest. It was flat, all premeditated. Wow. Every dinner she hosted, every dress she wore, every public caress, everything had a purpose. Later on, another sentence. I need to neutralize Dorothy. Her presence is too strong. He listens to her. Wine listens to her. And just below, maybe send it to your sister's house for a few months. Make it look like it's well-deserved rest. I closed the notebook for a second. I put my hand to my chest. That time when she convinced me to take a vacation in Florida, saying that William needed space to take care of his grief. Now I understood. It was part of the plan. She wanted to erase my tracks gently, but accurately. Even rehearsed phrases for future speeches were there. Dorothy was a dedicated employee, and I was honored to continue her work. Like ID left something for her, as if I had passed him a baton. She didn't just want to inherit the assets. She wanted to inherit the narrative, to be remembered as the noble wife who welcomed the former maid as part of the family. And in the midst of all that pain, something strange came. I couldn't feel angry. It was a pity, pure and simple, because only those who have never had a real one feel this need to invent history. Charlotte was beautiful, intelligent, articulate, but empty. And an empty heart tries to fill the world with titles. achievements, control. Everything she wrote in that notebook was not about me. It was about the hole inside it that not even Whitmore's name could fill. And there, was, alone in that house full of memories, I realized something that I need to share with you now. Sometimes the recognition we expect from the other never comes, but the truth always finds a way to come back to us, like a wave that insists on touching our feet, even when we are already far from the sea. And I think that if you've come this far with me, it's because you know what I'm talking about. And the most beautiful thing is yet to come. I closed the notebook, put it back in the box, not out of cowardice, but by choice. That notebook did not belong to me. It was a cracked mirror of another woman's soul. I had finally understood that my story no longer depended on what others wanted to tell about me. But before ending that cycle, there was still one last visit I needed to make, one that I had been postponing since the funeral, and the person who was waiting for me was so outcast, had more to say than I imagined. Want to know who it was? I'll tell you right away. But no, when do? What I heard in that reunion changed everything again. Time has a curious way of turning, sometimes slow, sometimes so fast that we barely feel it. It's been a few months since I last stepped foot in that courtroom. The house in Tybee already had my smell, my rhythm, my presence. The routine was simple. Well, early walks, tea with lemon in the late afternoon, and nights with the window open, listening to the noise of the sea. I thought everything had settled as it should, until video wine out on an ordinary Tuesday. I heard knocks on the front door, 3 respectful touches, slow. When I opened it, I came across 2 faces that time has not erased. It has only aged. Thomas and Melissa, William's children. Those that I cradled in my arms when the fever rose at dawn. The ones who ran down the hallway of the mansion calling out Miss Dotty every time they scratched themselves or wanted cookies before dinner. They have grown? No, of course. Thomas had gray hair at her temples, and Melissa had the same eyes as Grace, but now with soft wrinkles at the corners. The 2 held a basket of fresh cornbread and a jar of jam, as if they were returning to their grandmother's house. I was silent for a moment. My body stood still, but my soul, she ran inside, loose, as if she didn't know whether to open or protect herself. May we come in, Miss Dotty? Thomas asked. That miss, who survived the time, cut my chest. I opened the door slowly. I made coffee for the 3 of us. They sat on the porch, on the same wooden benches where Grace liked to knit. We stayed a few minutes in silence, just listening to the waves. Then Melissa said, "Well, Todd, we should have come earlier, but the truth is that Charlotte took us away from everything. She said that the lady didn't want to know about us anymore, that I was tired, bitter." I took a deep breath. I didn't even feel anger, just a gentle sadness, which had already dried up. Thomas leaned forward. "Nein, Sidyaman. resting his elbows on his knees. Dad asked about you, even confused. Sometimes he would say, "Wow, is Dorothy back yet? Did she bake the cake today?" And Charlotte said that the lady had left on her own, that he preferred to rest. He looked into my eyes. Sorry, we believed. We stopped listening to the heart. I nodded. Slowly. Now, I understand. Too young to fight. Too old to pretend it didn't hurt. No. How? There are memories that come back like perfume forgotten in an old handkerchief. All it takes is a word, a voice, a smell of coffee. No. And they come back with everything. That day, sitting William's children on my porch came to me every Easter Sunday. Wow. Every birthday with carrot cake. Every hug before school. Memory is a strange animal. It hurts and consoles at the same time. And if you on the other side have ever experienced something like this, if a memory touched you just by hearing it, comment here. I remember, Anna, because there are memories that are not only ours. It spreads, reaches people we've never seen, and embraces it from within. We stayed there together for hours. I didn't cry. I didn't even need to. I just poured more coffee, cut slices of bread, and we heard the waves talking low. They did not ask for reconnection. Well, no. They didn't demand affection. They just came, and sometimes come, down. That's all. When they left, Melissa hugged me like she did when she was a little girl and said, "You're the only one who knows how to bandage that doesn't burn." I laughed, and in that smile, without great promises, life went on. But at night, putting away the dishes, I noticed a forgotten sheet of paper on the chair. It was a copy, a letter from William. Maid, why? Sit at your pew. Dated 3 months before he died. Well, in his handwriting, no, I know, shaky but unmistakable, addressed to the foundation. The content? I only read one line, and I froze. The rest, you're going to have to hear from me, because what was written there changed everything again. I was still holding the sheet when night fell. The letter was typed, but in the end, there was William's signature. Oh, half shaky, half firm, as if he had put his heart on the tip of his pen. It was a letter addressed to the Dottie's Haven Foundation. Oh, the one we had built with so much effort and which was almost forgotten by the vanity of others. In the letter, he said that he wished that the story of the creation of that work and the woman who inspired it would never be erased. His words, Dorothy's not just part of the mission. She's the origin of it. I read that with my chest cracking. And at that moment, I realized that what the justice of men had resolved in papers, the truth of life resolved in remembrance. It was as if, even on the other side, William still held out his hand to me. But not everyone accepts losing. Charlotte, as expected, tried to reinvent herself. I learned from acquaintances that she went to Charleston. There, we know to town, a city to and then I staggered folk to town. He rented a small townhouse, tried to do luxury real estate consulting, and appeared at some events with a new smile. Why, lighter hair, and a speech of overcoming. But rumor, why, rumor flies, and there, on City Orchard, Coppertide, and there, the name Whitmore also had roots. It was enough for someone to recognize it, to remember the process, the contestation of the will, now, and the story began to leak like water on a rotten board. Documents from the hearing circulated. No charm, the transcript of a sentence by the judge arrived in the hands of a social columnist who, before, drooled over it. Emotional manipulation, ethical dishonesty in an attempt to erase effective memory. It was official. Charlotte had become persona non grata in the same salons where she once reigned in beige suits and fake pearls. Meanwhile, here in Savannah, something unexpected happened. A young journalist, Olivia Duval, of the local newspaper, the Savannah Ledger, showed up at my door, hair tied up, notebook on his lap, eyes alive. Non-issue. He said he was writing an article called The Case of the Forgotten Testament and wanted to hear my version from me. Hesitated. No stillness. I don't think I'm a story for the newspaper. But she looked me in the eyes with such a desire to understand that I said yes. We sat on the porch. She turned on the tape recorder. But didn't even need questions. I started counting, not angry, nor with vanity. When I is so calm, how do you felt terror? I told it as someone who shares what was lived with the soul. I talked about Grace, William, the children, the nights I prayed to continue, even without ground, the Sundays I served with pain in my back, but with faith in my heart. I talked about the embroidered quilt, the recipes on the wall, and a stitchified down. The day I removed the envelope from the bag and handed it to the judge without saying a word. Olivia only took notes. Sometimes he took a deep breath. Other times he wiped his eyes. She asked me at the end, "Do you regret anything?" I replied quietly, "Nay, just not having believed before that I deserved more." Days later, the article came out. It was just a page, but it looked like an altar. Dorothy Harris, the woman whose silence never silenced. Thus it began. They called me the guardian of memory, the dignified one, the symbol of justice that does not scream. The foundation received donations. Kaiby's house gained visitors who left flowers at the gate with notes. "Thank you for existing. And, it's not fame, nor applause. It's respect, and after an invisible life, to be seen with truth. Well, it's a relief that I can't explain. But life, even when it seems to have settled down, still keeps its curves, because a week after publication, I received a letter without a sender. He only said, "Han, what did you don't think it's over." Inside, an old photo, cropped, with a detail that I had never noticed before. something that, if true, changes even the origin of the story. And now, oh, I did I need to find out what that means, because there are secrets that, oh no, when they reappear, ask to be dug up. And what I saw in that image, it can change everything again. I still had the cropped photo in my hands when the mailman arrived that morning, bringing a beige envelope without major markings, but with the old coat of arms of the law, firm Whitmore and Duval. I recognized it from afar. It was the office William used before Charlotte convinced him to change everything. At the time, I lived in Eastselband, Horton, Arsimonere, a sewage here. They said it was modernization, that the new office had more market visibility, but I knew it was just another way for her to erase what came before. I sat on the couch with the envelope on my lap. It was sealed with red wax, as if it were an old thing, one of those that we respect only for care. I opened it gently, and inside was a letter from Mr. Cobb, Lionel Green, the lawyer who had worked with William for more than 30 years. Lionel's handwriting was firm as always. Dorothy, I'm coming now to Catistale Town. This document was left with me, with the instruction that it would only be delivered if Charlotte changed the procedures of the succession. That's why it took a while. But now, has yours not? And next to the letter, a note folded to the nines, thick paper, smell of old cupboard and dry paint. On top, handwritten, why this noble cow, what's he go? If I leave before I fix this, my heart stopped for a moment. I remembered the nights when William would talk about setting things up, the times he forgot names, but he didn't forget to ask if I had already eaten. I unfolded the note. The words were shaky, but recognizable. He said, Dottie, down. If in leaving, before I do everything as I should, forgive me. So much I should have said. You took care of Grace with your soul, my children with the patience I never had, and me, even when I no longer remembered how. You were the guardian of our home, of our peace, of our truth. Charlotte tried to convince me of many things, and out of cowardice, out of tiredness, out of weakness. Sometimes I did, but I never forgot you. Never. If this note has reached you, it is because the justice that was due to you has somehow happened, and before time silences me. I need you to know something I've never said out loud, but that I've always felt. You have always been my true family. With love and gratitude, William. How am I? I read that in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink for a long time. It was as if, inside me, in a one, in now, enough saw it. An old door had calmly closed, not with a bang, with peace. It was the kind of recognition that we wait for our whole lives, even without admitting it. It was not an inheritance, nor goods. It was a name. It was a place. It was the right to belong. I stood there, with the ticket in my lap, looking out the window at the sea. The world outside followed, but inside me, everything had quieted down. And then, when I went to put the note in the drawer of the dresser, wow, something fell out of the false bottom. A smaller envelope, with a symbol that I recognized at the time. The iris flower of the foundation. Open. It was a donation receipt, large, made in my name, but never processed, and a contact from a person, Eloise Carpenter, Seattle. I have never heard that name, but she knew something, and I needed to find out what it was, because somehow the past still wanted to tell me one more truth. It was by looking at that name on the paper, Eloise Carpenter, Seattle, that something inside me awoke again. But unlike the other times, it was not pain, nor fear, neither how could he adventures. It was impulse. It was the will to continue, to do something with everything that life had told me, even without me having asked for it. I called Eloise 2 days later. Her voice was paused, sweet, like someone who has been carrying secrets for too long. Hi. She told me that she worked in an organization of elderly women who had lost their homes due to family disputes, abandoned by sons-in-law, daughters-in-law, when William visited Seattle in 1999, he talked about you, Dorothy. I said that you were the reason for believing that strong women can build futures, even when everything tries to erase them. I hung up the phone with my heart lit. The house in Tybee, that quiet space that was already my refuge, needed to take a deeper breath. And that's how the Harris Foundation was born. Slowly, calm, with firm stitching and stitch by stitch. Stitch by Olam. I started small, with small table on the porch, pamphlets made on the library's printer, and a phrase written in white chalk on the fence board. Here you can hear women that no one else hears. In the beginning, 2 came, then 5. Then a lady named Beverly brought tea, and another named June brought handkerchiefs embroidered with their mothers' names. Those women, they reminded me of myself in so many different phases. One had raised 7 children, and today slept in a borrowed room because they didn't want elderly noise in the house. Another was a caregiver for a husband with Alzheimer's for 12 years, and then forgotten by stepchildren who said that she had an obligation. It was not charity that I did. It was devolution, because everything I lacked, I could now offer. Not money and not promise, but the rarest of all, presents. Every Tuesday, we met in the living room of the house for a sewing workshop. On Thursdays, I taught how to organize finances, the way I learned by writing down Mr. Whitmore's accounts in notebooks, and sometimes we just sat in a circle, drank cinnamon tea, and talked about the pains that no one else wanted to hear. The youngest was 61, the oldest 89, but they all carried the same silence on their shoulders, that of having been necessary until they ceased to be. One day, one of them, Eunice, held me by the hand and said, "Oh, Dottie, Ma, I thought my life was over, but here, mind him though. Here I exist. I couldn't answer anything at the time. I just hugged him, and I kept that phrase in my chest, hammering. No, there are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, and they'll what is certain twice so. We help another heart to breathe. Like this video and sign up. Now, okay. And let's make this story reach those who need it. Well, because sometimes that's all someone lacks, knowing that they're not alone. And it was among these stories, these tea afternoons, these wrinkled hands that embroidered while venting, that I understood what freedom really was. It was not the will, not even the house, nor justice. It was the right to continue being, even after all. And when the foundation completed 1 year, we received a special invitation. A photographic exhibition in Atlanta wanted to tell the story of women who started over after 70. And one of the photos they sent was mine, on the porch, serving coffee to Mrs. Beverly. But there was a detail in that photo that made me uneasy. A brooch, a golden brooch, pinned to the collar of my dress. I didn't remember putting it on. And when I enlarged the image, my heart raced. That brooch was Grace's, William's first wife. I knew because I was the one who sewed it on the hem of her wedding dress, and he had disappeared years ago. How that brooch appeared on my clothes that day? Who put it, and why? Was it a coincidence? Or was there someone else behind it all? Someone who always knew more than I imagined. The letter arrived on a cloudy morning, one of those when the sky seems to weigh on our shoulders. I was watering the violets on the balcony when the lady at the post office, who already knows me by name, handed me a simple, almost shy envelope. No plain paper, no elegant seal, no known sender, only my name written in a shaky yet painfully familiar handwriting. Charlotte. I held it in my hands for a good 10 minutes, right there, with the smell of wet earth embracing me. I knew that at some point this could happen. The world goes around, and sometimes the one who pushed us from above is the one who ends up having to knock on our door. But I never imagined that she would have the courage to write. I opened the envelope slowly. There was no perfume, no frills. It was just paper and truth, or almost true. She started by saying that she didn't expect me to forgive her, that she had already lost everything she thought she had achieved. Dorothy, she wrote, I don't write to ask for inheritance, nor to rebuild bridges. I just wanted to say that I made a big mistake. I made a mistake because I underestimated you, because I thought you were just a shadow. And now I understand that it was the light of the whole house. William knew. I didn't see it. I had oh God. And I paid dearly. I continued reading. She said she was living with a cousin in Tallahassee. When I saw the sugar to sweat children, selling catalog products and trying to be someone outside of high heels and pose. The lyrics failed in some passages, as if she herself had hesitated to say certain things. But in the end, there was the request. Will one day, if I go to Tybee, be able to see you? Not as a rival, nor as an enemy, just as people. I stared at those words as if facing a mirror that shows what we no longer need to be. There was no poison, no armor. She was a broken woman, trying to pick up the pieces with the little that was left of dignity. I folded the letter carefully. Now, not for her, but for me, because even after everything, there was still a space in me that knew how to respect the end of wars. I walked down the trail to the edge of the sea, envelope between my fingers. The wind was blowing firmly, as if the world itself was also waiting for my decision. I stood there for a while, looking at the horizon, feeling the cold sand beneath my feet, and listening to the waves crash as if whispering old advice. The letter flew out of my hand without me noticing. I didn't run after it. I just watched. I let the wind decide what to do with it. No, there are pains that we don't need to reopen. There are requests that do not need an answer. And there are silences that say more than 1,000 words. Charlotte didn't need to know what I was going to do. And maybe, just maybe, what she deserved most. It was exactly that, not knowing. But that evening, when I returned home, I found something even more unexpected. A package was waiting for me at the door. Now, I'll wait then unnamed, no sender. Inside, there was a light wooden frame with an old black and white photograph. Me, Anand, William, and Grace, sitting on the steps of the mansion's entrance, with a tray of lemonade next to them and their children playing in the background. I had never seen that photo before. Never. I am you child. And on the back, a phrase scribbled in firm handwriting. So that you never forget where you came from and who he always was. It was at that moment that I felt that the story still hid one last truth, because that photo, it could only have been taken by one person, someone who has always been there, in the shadows, watching. What if that person was still alive? What else would she have in store? What was still missing for me to discover about my own history? I never imagined that I would step in a court again after that day when I took the will out of my purse, as if taking the soul out of silence. But time, he doesn't go around by chance. A year and a half after everything, I received a call from a young, firm voice with a Georgian accent. It was a public defender lawyer named Hannah. She had read the article about me in the local newspaper. And more than that, she had listened to the video of a lecture recorded there at the foundation, where, without rehearsing, I said that a woman's silence can carry more history than any library. Hannah was handling a complicated case. A lady named Miss Lorraine was being disowned by her own daughter. After decades of working together on a farm, the daughter claimed that her mother was senile, that the old will was no longer valid. But there were contradictions, and the judge was reticent. Hannah wanted me to go there not to speak as an expert in law. I wouldn't even know how, but as someone who knew the bitter taste of injustice and the sweet weight of reparation. I thought about it for 2 days. I went to the beach, sat on that rock, where I usually talk to my thoughts, and asked the sea if it was worth opening my mouth again. The answer came in the form of foam on the feet. It was not opening the mouth, it was opening the heart. I arrived at the courtroom dressed the same way I always was. Simple, May, and young, but firm. I wore the linen coat from Grace's funeral because it carries more dignity than any jewelry. When they called me to speak, I got up slowly, without haste. The judge, a gray-haired man, took off his glasses and made a slight gesture with his head. He looked at me as if he recognized an old tree in the middle of the concrete. I said few words. I didn't need more than that. Your Excellency, sometimes a woman's silence is what screams the most. When one of us spends our lives caring, serving, listening, it's easy to forget that we feel it too, which also keeps, and that also deserves to be heard. Miss Lorraine is not here to beg. She is here to remember what was already hers. After that, I sat down. I didn't need it anymore. The session ended, and the judge suspended the decision for a week later. But I didn't go there to convince anyone. I went to be a living witness that time. When it finds courage, does justice, and it was, as I left the room, with my small step and my faded leather bag, that a woman approached. He must have been in his 70s, face marked by the sun and fatigue. He held my hands tightly, but it was a delicate kind of force, like someone holding his own mother. Why so, Artablians? You gave me courage, she said. Is that it? But it was enough. I didn't have to answer. I just shook her hand. I just shook her hand. I stayed there, bound, in that squeeze, feeling that sometimes life fits into a gesture without words. And when I returned home that night, the full moon drew shadows on the porch wall. I sat in the rocking chair and leaned my head back. The breeze came from the sea. But something in that breeze seemed different to me. It wasn't just the wind. It was a smell. Lavender. The way Grace used to wear it in her hair. I closed my eyes for a moment. And then I listened. A subtle noise of paper being placed under the door. I got up, unhurriedly, and went there. A small envelope, without a name, without an address, just a hand-drawn flower. The same iris as the foundation. Inside, now, a single sheet, with a phrase written in cursive. Wow, firm and fresh. Not everything has been told. No. Dorothy, and now it's time to know who always knew. But who had written that? And what was still hidden between the folds of my own past? That afternoon, the light came through the light curtain of the balcony with a delicacy that seemed to ask permission before touching the skin. I stood there, my glass of iced tea in my hand, half a lemon. Little sugar? No. The way I learned from Grace, and the sound of the sea in the background, singing its eternal litany of back and forth, his bare feet resting on the warm wood, the rocking chair creaking slowly, as if he also told memories along with me. And it was in this good silence that I began to talk to myself. In thought, I thought about everything I experienced, in everything I lost, in everything I took with me without knowing I was taking it. And I came to a simple truth. Now, you don't have to scream to be heard. There is no need to slam the door or raise your hand. Sometimes the strength lies precisely in the silent way we remain standing, even when they try to erase us. I was invisible. Noun, Macta sewed and Schuster. Yes, for a long time. But today, I know, those who truly see do not need a spotlight. It just needs memory. I remembered the first day I walked into the Whitmore house, with my suitcase patched and my light blue dress ironed. I didn't know what to expect. I just wanted to work with dignity, to be useful, to serve with respect. I ended up living a whole life within another. I was part of a family that never came out as such, and yet he kept me in the details. In William's note, Maid, in the embroidered quilt, in the framed recipes, in his silence. And now, how? Sitting here, now, looking at the horizon that never tires of arriving and leaving. I understand. True love doesn't have to show off. It lives in the memory of those who saw you, even when you thought you were just another shadow on the wall. We live thinking that dignity is a prize that is received at the end, after suffering, after fighting. But no, dignity is a habit, a way to exist, even when no one is looking, a way of responding to injustice without getting dirty with it, to choose not to take revenge, even when everything screams for revenge, to walk steadily, even when the ground shakes. I lost a lot. It's true. I lost place. I lost my name. I lost space, even within history itself. Wow. But I bought time. And time, my dear, time is a patient judge. He doesn't scream. He doesn't rush. He doesn't bend. He just observes. And one day, as calmly as the tide rises, he puts everything in its proper place. These days, I heard one of the ladies of the foundation say, "Dorothy, you won beautifully." And I smiled, because winning beautiful does not mean winning everything. It means not getting lost along the way. And that's what I did. I found myself, after getting lost so many times, but on that particular afternoon, there was something different in the air, because that letter with the iris drawn didn't leave my head. Not everything has been told. Dorothy, these words visited me like a sweet haunting, asking myself, poking, how? What if there were still more? What if someone, during all these years, knew things that even I no longer remembered? That's when the phone rang, and the name on the display made me freeze for a moment. Thomas Whitmore, I am the Hellman. The eldest son, the one I cradled in my arms with bronchitis, who joked with me in the kitchen, who one day fell silent, and now, so many years later, seemed ready to say something. I answered with my heart beating in the same rhythm as the tide. "Miss Dotty, do you have a minute?" And at that moment, I knew the story was not yet over. Not completely, because what he told me next, I would change everything again. The phone that night was the last chapter that time still had for me. Thomas told me that while organizing the family's old archives, he had found a cassette tape recording hidden among his father's books. It was a conversation between William and Grace, made decades ago, when she was still alive. He sent me the recording by email, and I, with trembling hands, pressed play. Grace's voice, sweet and serene, said, "Mary, how will, when I'm no longer here, I used to how at a theory. Promise one thing, take care of Dorothy as she took care of us. It is part of our home, Lydiat, our history. They are known, but not common. Our faith, And he replied, "Oh, I see. You now washed emotionally. Wow, thou city calm, finally calm. I promise, my love, it will always be family." It was there that I realized that life didn't owe me anything anymore. The cycle was complete. Today, now, when I wake up, the sound of the sea no longer brings me sad memories. It brings peace. The foundation is still going strong. We have more women coming in every week. And now the Whitmore's grandchildren also help out as volunteers. Thomas visits me on Sundays, brings me coffee and laughter. We jail, and sometimes we spend hours looking at the sea without having to say a word. Now, Charlotte never sent a letter again. I heard from an old neighbor that she moved out, opened a small bookstore, and walks quietly, and somehow, I hope she found the same kind of peace that I did the other day, tidying up the bookshelf. Oh, I found the frame of the old photo. Me, Grace, and William sitting on the porch. I put my hand against the glass and whispered softly, "We did it. Not because we beat someone, but because we beat time. Because time, this patient judge who doesn't rush to judge, has taught me that true love is never lost. It just changes places. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that life is not about what they take from us, but about what we choose to keep. And I chose to keep what made me whole. I learned that forgiveness is not forgetting. It is letting the past rest without it taking our peace with it, and that no one needs applause to be strong. Just keep being who you are, even when no one else believes. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for staying with me so far, listening to this part of my life. Well, there are things that we only understand when we share, and maybe my story is just one among many. But if it touched your heart in some way, then it was worth every memory I opened. If you can, leave a like for me. It's like a hug that warms up. Nay, a way of saying, "I'm here," and sign up too. Wow. So we can keep meeting. This is where I prepare coffee, tell my memories, and listen to yours too. Write in the comments of which city you're listening to me. I love to know where these stories travel from to get to your home. And it activates the bell, so you don't lose it when the coffee is ironed again. Tomorrow, named, why not case, what can it be your crowd? The sun will rise again over Tybee, and it'll water the flowers in the garden before the wind changes. And who knows, not I come. Maybe the next time I come here to tell you another story, I'll talk about that woman who found love at the end of her life, or that secret that the sea gave me back years later. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next real story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.